Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Thank you, YouTube. In this video, let us discuss the methodology in the identification of environmental aspect. What methodology have we got? Input, output. What is it for? Identify environmental aspect. Why? Because as per definition of the ISO 14001 version 2015, as you could see here, is International Standard for Environmental Management System. What is it? It is managing environmental aspects. How? By fulfilling compliance, obligation, and addressing risk and opportunities. But what is environmental aspects? Environmental aspects, as per definition of the ISO 14001, is elements of our activities, product, and services that interacts or can interact with the environment. Therefore, this is our discussion today. We will look at one example that whereby a process called arc welding, and from this process we identify what are the environmental aspects involved in this process. Before we go on, I am imploring all my fellow Muslim brothers and sisters, please do not watch this video if you are already in a mosque for the Friday prayers or attending any religious lessons and events. Thank you very much. Love you for that. And I wish you Jannatul Na'im, inshallah. Right. Immediately after this, I will show you the chronology of the implementation of ISO 14001, so the major steps, and we will look where this input-output process, that is, where the identification of environmental aspects is situated. Then we will look at arc welding and do a little bit of examples for its input-output analysis to identify environmental aspects and their respective environmental impact. And then we'll take a look at the aspects impact register, which I call the dashboard. Okay, let's get into the chronology from the implementation of ISO 14001. As you can see, this context of organization, scope of EMS organization is context, EMS fulfillment, needs and expectation of interested parties. Who are they? These are the administration part of the ISO 14001. Input-output analysis, whereby we identify a process which is used, a methodology which is used in the identification of environmental aspects, is over here. There you are. Very early, isn't it? Because when we want to implement ISO 14001, the first thing that we got to do is to identify what are our environmental aspects. And once we have done that, by virtue of doing, as we are going to look at, input-output analysis, after that is being done, the entire array of environmental aspects that we have got, and perhaps, well, I could say identified, will go into a scheme of evaluation, a step whereby we evaluate those aspects. Why? To determine how it interacts with the environment and how significant is their respective environmental impact. Therefore, we have then, after the evaluation, a list of perhaps we are able to differentiate of all the environmental aspects that we have identified, which ones are significant. Got it? It's numeric, all right? It can be any formula, but I show you how simple we do this. And also, an environmental management system, we have to address what is called risk and opportunity. And once that is done, we have it incorporated in our aspect impact register. Okay, therefore, what we have now at this point is the list of environmental aspects and their corresponding impact in the form of aspects impact register. Now, if we want to perform, if we want to establish an environmental management system, this is the first thing that we got to do: identify environmental aspects. Once we have the aspects impact register fully done, then we look at it, and the organization's top management especially and the steering committee will sit down and figure out what sort of policy statement would be appropriate for the company by virtue of linking the environmental policy with a background of their list of environmental aspects impact. After that is done, the policy statement, you can do it in a subtle manner, very professional statement and words of arrangements and all this. Once that is done, the company has got to set, based on the aspects impact register again, what would be their environmental objectives. What are the objectives? What is the way forward? Which direction they want to bring the company in terms of environmental management. Okay, once the objective is set and the target is laid out, you can have the target there in the objectives. Okay, and we start to perform, we start to formulate, we start to devise, we start to figure out who do what, when, and how in order to achieve the respective environmental objective and targets. These are the direction of the company. This is what the company wants to achieve, and therefore this is what is called as the intended outcome for the company. Got it? Don't have to change the words objective, targets, and environmental management program. The new version 14,001 doesn't mean that. It only means when they introduce the word intended outcome, objectives, targets, and planning and environmental management program. Objective and targets is the intended outcome. How to achieve it is the planning action, which is environmental management program. Nonetheless, the standard says the intended outcome must include, look, enhancements of environmental performance. That is why in my dashboard, in this aspects impact register that I'm going to show you, we will include environmental performance evaluation as part of the dashboard. An intended outcome based on this new standard is about fulfilling compliance obligation. It has got to be reflected in the policy, in the objective, in the target, and also in the environmental management program. And also, it is absolutely, the intended outcome is absolutely about achieving environmental objectives. I hope that is clear. Okay, as I promised you, let's take a look at that process called Arc Welding, and let's take a look how we do the input-output analysis in the identification of environmental aspects. Look, this is a specific process. This is one of the unique process for this company. Not everybody is able to do this. Therefore, in order to do the identification of environmental aspects from this process, we have got to involve the hands-on people, the experts themselves. Therefore, in my case, I would go down to the production area and meet these people bring the let them describe to me the process, explain to me what they use in terms of material, substance, because environmental aspects is actually anything that interacts or can interact with the environment. Therefore, by virtue of that, I will get these people to explain to me all the tools, equipments, electrical sources, materials that they use in this process called arc welding. And here you go. This is what I got from them. Okay, so we have here the input-output analysis, whereby input are any environmental aspects that come in the process, and whereas output are those environmental aspects that is being released out from the process. Look, as far as environmental aspects is concerned, by virtue of the definition, it is anything, any matter, any substance, any material, any equipment, any building, materials, waste, products. These are all environmental aspects. And environmental aspect is not the name of a process. It is a thing. Got it? Now, let's take a look. We have here in this process, he showed me that they have got metal pieces that they have got to weld together in the arc welding process. And when I look at it, it is metal, really metal. It is steel alloy, which has got to be welded together in such what you call precise welding process over here. And it is an input aspect. It comes into this process to be welded together. So what is its environmental impact? So in order to determine its environmental impact, we have to identify, by virtue of its states as an environmental aspect, is an input aspect. Therefore, we got to look at its life cycle perspective. This is ISO 14001 version 2015. How to look at its life cycle perspective? Since metal pieces is an input environmental aspect, we got to ask a question: where does it come from? By means of looking at its life cycle. Therefore, we have got to look at upstream, where it comes from, in order to determine its environmental impact. Therefore, these metal pieces, as we discussed, it actually comes from metal fabricator. It comes in the form of cut pieces. It comes from a steel mill that produces pieces of rolls of metals, and it comes from smelter. These two industries are already interacting with the environment, causing air pollution, causing soil contamination if you go to these factories. But if we decided to stop there, we can stop there. But for me, I want to go right to the bottom of where it comes from in order to determine its final absolute environmental impact. So I go on further. It comes from a process called mining of metal ore. And when I look at that process, it involves geological structure, rock structure, where we have got to blast the rock structure, we have got to dredge, we've got to excavate some of the metals, we got to use water. And these mountains, rocky mountains, are where all these metals are situated. So when we look at it, the more extraction of these metals, the more explosion of these hills, the more excavation, the more drilling is done. So eventually we will look at, it is believed that the environmental resources where these metals are in their ore forms from those natural resources will get less and less. Ultimately, the environmental impact finally upstream is resource depletion. This is the environmentalist version. Geologists would say that it has caused geological damage to the structure of the mesosphere of the earth crust, for example, or of the earth rocky structures. It is true. The earth, mountains and hills are strong, natural civil structure which is being destroyed because humans got to extract, and the impact is geological damage. You can have that in addition to resource depletion if you want to. That is the interaction of metal pieces. That is why metal pieces is an environmental aspect, because it interacts with the environment and has caused resource depletion. Upstream life cycle perspective. Now, as the welding is done, we saw that on the other hand, one of the environmental aspects that interact with the environment is the release of what is called slags and splatter from the welding process. And it is an output aspect. Therefore, what environmental impact does it pose? We got to look at the downstream of its life cycle. Therefore, the question for downstream is, what happens to it next? Okay, and it has caused some form. It has been collected by contractors. It has been collected and it has been sent to some dumping ground, but most of the time it has been recycled. It has been recycled and it has gone through some form of electrolysis and has discharged some form of water, and that may cause, well, this is very remote, hydrological imbalance. We can do that because we are referring to this factory that uses groundwater. But on top of that, I would say this splatter is being, most of the time in many countries, it has been dumped into the secure landfill, and therefore the environmental impact, if you are to ask me, is actually soil contamination. I'm just giving an example taken from some of the clients who did this. It's nothing wrong to talk about hydrological balance because they are referring to electrolytic process of the recovery of metals from splatter and slag. I don't mind that. But eventually those residues, if we will go further, it will be disposed of in a secure landfill, and that would cause environmental contamination called soil pollution or soil contamination. It is sent to a sanitary landfill, if not a secure landfill. So you have the other environmental aspects as input, for example, tungsten electrodes, when we have got GRS, what you call arc welding, perhaps using tungsten, and you've got a lot of electrical energy being involved, and you've got a used tungsten electrode which is disposed of, and when electrical energy is involved, there's a lot of radiation. Some of them is UV radiation that causes air pollution, inert gases, fugitive inert gases that causes air pollution, and heat, radiant heat. Ozone is being released as well, and it has caused toxic air pollution in this area. These are some examples. The UV radiation is actually causing radiant heat, not soil contamination. Sorry about that. We have not corrected this. Okay, so this is about the identification of environmental aspects from arc welding. Fine. So as I promised, in actual practice, you have got an area, a list, many more environmental aspects that we can identify from here. The wire cords, all those fuses, all those motors, all those equipments. All right, these are all involved, but I didn't include it because we want to have this discussion short. Please add in comments below if you've got other things to discuss. You're welcome to do that. Right now, I'm not the expert in arc welding. I learned from them. Now, let us take a look at what ultimately I want to share with you is actually the aspects impact register, which I call the dashboard. Okay, and this is a very important dashboard, as important as the dashboard of your perhaps Nissan GTR. Okay, Nissan Skyline GTR. I don't own one, so yeah, I'm just guessing. So the format that I'm showing before you, please remember, I have developed this format from my previous gurus who start off with the activities, process, and aspects as the register requisites, but I add on as time goes by. You know, these are aspects, these are impacts, all listed carefully after doing tedious work called environmental aspects impact identification. All right, once the input output is done, this is how we summarized or listed them down in a proper manner. And we have got over here what you see now I'm highlighting is the environmental aspect evaluation, actually, to determine which environmental aspect is more significant by virtue of having criteria. We call this environmental aspects evaluation aspects impact evaluation criteria. Here is the magnitude, severity, etc. with numerics like this. These are just examples. Eventually we have got a few other evaluation criteria, and we have got a formula here where all this is added up and multiplied by duration and frequency. This is learned from statistics used in health safety, actually, and eventually we got the score. So by virtue of the score, we know that which aspects score higher, meaning most significant impact. Okay, and then we have over here the risk, okay, and opportunity. So for this particular aspect, metal pieces, we have the risk of, in this case, in this factory, it seems that the purity varies. So those are risks when we do arc welding. For them, I learned from them. I'm not the expert. I got it from them. And the opportunity that they have is to have a more selective criteria for the selection of metal that they want to use for welding to produce their desired products. Okay, and other thing, remember, intended outcome should include, actually it must include some form of environmental performance as our intended outcome, right? In our environmental management system, remember, intended outcome, ISO 14001 version 2015. So here we are, we have the environmental performance evaluation in the dashboard. MPI is management performance index, OPI is operations performance index, and ECI is environmental condition index before you. And we have the overall EPE for each environmental aspect. Don't you fancy that? This is what we will present to the top management on a periodic basis, or we can also present this to the visiting certification body auditors. Show them this and where we are. Have we achieved them? If we can't, why? That will be explained administratively. So that's it. So from the risks and opportunities, we will develop our objective. Here we go. Then from here we start to develop our objective, our targets, our environmental management program, and we are set to get it executed. Implementation of environmental management system in compliance with ISO 14001 version 2015. Thank you very much, YouTube. Thank you very much, subscribers, viewers, and supporters of this channel. I wish you all the best. And in Bahasa Melayu, I wish you semoga dikurniakan kesenangan, keselamatan, kesejahteraan, kebahagiaan, dan kejayaan kehidupan di dunia dan di akhirat. As a Muslim, I wish everybody, whoever you are, wherever you are in this planet, until we meet in the next video, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.